So in my mid to late 20s, because I'd started to suffer pretty significantly, I decided, well, since things are starting to get bad, why don't I give the religion of my youth a go? That religion being Christianity. What I didn't recognize at the time was that my suffering, which showed up as a combination of depression, anxiety, self-sabotage, and some addictive behaviors, was the direct result of burying and repressing emotions in childhood, which we do as kids in a usually fruitless attempt to get protection and love from our caregivers. And in my case, that meant repressing anger. So my MO was, I have to bury and repress my anger and be good, or be a good boy, so that mommy and daddy will love me and keep me safe. And by the way, the other iteration of this, if you're not an anger repressor like I am, is hurt and vulnerability repression. So that means I have to bury and repress my hurt, sadness, and grief and be strong so that mommy and daddy will love me and keep me safe. But either way, the process of coming out of emotional repression is the same. So when I was 26 and I tried my hand at Christianity again, part of it felt really familiar because, it's what I was raised with. But even more familiar was the impulse to do things, believe things, or take on identities in order to get my needs met from an authority or a higher power or a God. In childhood, those gods had been mom and dad or, other important adults in my life. We call them VIPs in KI. And we all do this. Getting love, approval, care, attention, support, encouragement, affirmation, protection, praise from someone outside of ourselves is what our lives revolve around when we're in emotional repression. So I just transferred my unmet needs for all of that from mom and dad to this old, invisible white man in the sky and his son, who apparently had done me a huge favor by sacrificing and martyring himself and saying, I will love you unconditionally, Dan, on one condition: that I believed and trusted in him and his dad instead of in myself. This is exactly what I was already doing in emotional repression. Abandoning myself, aka repressing my anger and trying to be good, and taking on beliefs and identities that my caregivers and culture were offering me in order to get my needs met. That was the transaction, yeah? I will repress myself if you will give me love, approval, and safety. And so coming back into religion, it was like putting a hand into a perfectly sized glove, right? When I heard Christian lingo like less of me, more of him, or, humble yourself before God, or whatever it was, I was like, oh yeah, I can do that. I'm already doing that. Now, of course, I didn't recognize this at the time, but in hindsight, I can see that emotional repression is a set of rules or a religion that gets reinforced by any other religion or thought system or belief system that we enter into. After I left religion around age 30, I did the same thing in both 12-step and in non-duality and spirituality. In 12-step, they said, you're an addict and you're powerless. And I went, oh yeah, that's it, right? That's the truth. And I used that to reinforce my anger repression. And then in spirituality and non-duality, they said, there is no self. You're pure awareness. And I went, no, that's it. And I used that for the same reason. The point is, our emotional repression mechanism is clever as hell. And it will use anything that it can get its hands on, any belief system, thought system, or identity, in order to reinforce itself and keep us in a state of suffering. Because in that state, just like in childhood, it might keep us safe and it might get us love. I know I say this a lot, but it bears repeating because we're taught the opposite. We believe things not for truth, but in order to get our needs met, right? There's no other reason, despite what you've been taught. And you can challenge me on that, but I work with people all the time who are challenging their own beliefs in order to get free of emotional repression, and it totally works. Suffering ends when we start to recognize and make conscious its function, yeah? And see that its content ultimately is kind of irrelevant. If you'd like to be mentored on how to do this kind of work, then tap the link in the caption of the bio.